Minorities need to be actively involved in international missions.
Yes, but we really need to understand why it is that they haven't been more involved in the past.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you for that introduction, Mark, and I too would like to welcome you to the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're so very glad you've joined us for today's program. I'd like for you to meet all of our panelists today. Let's begin with the lady to my right. Ask her to say her name and go around the circle for everyone. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
My name is Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. Now that you've met everyone, it's time to get started with today's topic. The Witness is a Black Christian publication that engages issues of religion, race, justice, and culture from a biblical perspective. Cortland Perkins contributed an article to The Witness that focused on what he says is the missing piece in American international missions. In this article, he cites statistics from the International Mission Board, a Southern Baptist organization, that confirm that only a small number of minority ethnic groups, Africans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans, are serving as international missionaries. Walter Strickland, professor and special advisor to the president of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, has been appointed to begin the new Kingdom Diversity Missions Initiative, or KDMI, a program designed to encourage minorities to become more involved in Great Commission work around the world. The KDMI seeks to spark a Great Commission resurgence among multicultural Christians by creating a platform to catalyze minority believers to the ends of the earth and integrate a passion for international missions into their current and future areas of service. We're asking our panelists today to consider these three following questions. First of all, why is it important for minority ethnic groups to become more involved in international missions? Second question, have historical and socioeconomic factors stifled the passion for and commitment to the Great Commission with minority ethnic groups? And then the third question for today, how does your faith or denomination understand the Great Commission given by Jesus in Matthew 28, and is it still applicable in the 21st century? That is our subject for today, and again, we're so very glad you've joined us for today's program. We're going to go now back to those who began the program by making opening statements, and Dr. Matthews, you were the first one, so welcome to the program. Tell us more of your thoughts on this subject, please.
It's good being here, and I love the topic of missions, and the first question was, why is it important for minority ethnic groups to become more involved in international missions? And I'll speak from a Baptist perspective and specifically from a Southern Baptist perspective. The International Mission Board is part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and based on the recent numbers that I received, 3,600 missionaries are a part of the International Mission Board, and out of the 3,600, we have 15, a large whopping 15 missionaries out of the 3,600 within the African American community. And that is just staggering. Several years ago, I went to Africa on a mission trip to serve the missionaries from the Two Ocean clusters in Africa. These were missionaries all over the southern part of the continent. And I spoke with no less than probably 75 couples. And just hearing their stories, meeting their children, we did a VBS for their kids. And I was absolutely just, my heart was just broken into a million pieces in a good way. And I was so convicted because as a pastor, although I supported missions in the church and for people who wanted to go on international mission trips, I supported that within our majority African American context, but I didn't go myself. That was my first trip. And in Africa, the Lord impressed upon me to begin writing a new members class, orientation class, and everyone who joins our church will now become a part of a kingdom-oriented, a mission-minded church. Missions is, the Great Commission is an equal opportunity commission. Minorities were not exempt. And my experience being out of the country, when we go to these places, in particular to the places, the continents and countries where people of color are the majority people, when they see people who look like them, it really does make a difference. There's an affinity that's kind of there. We work in Ecuador with the people group called the Afro-Ecuadorians. There's over 1 million Afro-Ecuadorians in Ecuador, and there's one missionary family that I know of who we work with who is, they're responsible for ministering to over 1 million people. So he contacted us and said, hey, listen, we need some African Americans to go over there. So after 6 or 7 years, we have built great relationships. It's a great impact that we can make. Reasons for the lack, there's a lot of articles out there, and in fact, this one article here will mention some of the economic factors involved. I read some articles that oppression in the past have been a reason for the lack of participation with African Americans. And I want to challenge us and encourage us in the African American community that in the local church, I think we should consider that there's two people who are responsible for this lack. And I think the senior pastor may be both of them.
Well, all right. Then.
And I think the senior pastor, and this is from experience.
Yes.
And it's just a challenge.
Yeah.
The senior pastor may be the reason
for
the lack,
Wow.
and simultaneously he may be the remedy.
All right.
And I'll say more about that.
Send your cards and letters to Dr. Tony Matthews. Dr. Robeck, you also helped to start the program today, and you added a dimension.
Yeah, there's a long history of African Americans and the Great Commission and missionary here in the United States. And I would say I want to limit it to African Americans. I mean, obviously there are other people of color, and we have I think some much better statistics on them than we do on African Americans. But if you stop and think about it, obviously the U.S. had slaves from very early on, I mean from the 17th century. And as a result, they were not made, it was not possible for them to go as missionaries. Missionary boards never looked at them, churches never looked at them. Even ordination was a problem in a lot of places. However, and churches and church missionary sending agencies have been very, very slow at recruiting or sending African Americans. I know in my own church, the Assemblies of God, we have a really horrible record, at least prior to 1993. We've done much better since that time. But it's also the case that economic factors are enormous in the African American community. I don't think they lack passion. I don't think they lack commitment. And I don't think that they look at the Matthew 28, 19, and 20 and say, oh, well, that only applies to white folk. It just doesn't apply to us. I just don't think that's the case. But in early American history, there were people who said we need to be sending African Americans as missionaries. Samuel Hopkins, for instance, in 1770, he was a New Jersey congregational pastor. He had a plan and helped to pay for one slave, Bristol Yama, and one free black, John Quamino, to go to Princeton University and Seminary in order to go to the mission field. Unfortunately, the Revolutionary War came along while they were still in school, and he died shortly thereafter, and it didn't go anywhere. And then in 1820, the African American Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, began to send missionaries to Africa to evangelize them. And it's also the case that a few white missionaries in Congregational and Presbyterian churches in particular would sometimes take African Americans along with them, but they were always in the assistant position. You know, the white was the one who carried the message, and they probably served in secretarial ways. There were a lot of questions about what to do with African Americans who were Christians, who wanted to go, and so forth. And one of the things that really happened was that, you know, in the U.S. we had this kind of understanding of manifest destiny. It was God had providentially brought us to this place to do this kind of thing, and we are the lighthouse on the big hill that everybody can see. Some African Americans bought into that, and they understood that perhaps they had been brought into slavery so that they could hear the gospel as part of God's providential plan, and then they would return to Africa to bring the gospel and, of course, American civilization along with it. So that's where we kind of got this idea that these black folk could go to darkest Africa and help people. But it didn't work out very well either. I mean, there were a lot of back to Africa kinds of programs that were emerging, and abolitionists were very much opposed to it because they felt like free people who had been freed, who had been slaves, needed to stay here and tell their story in the American context. The Presbyterian minister, Robert Finley from New Jersey, in 1816 established the American Colonization Society. And again, this was, can we set up a place in Africa where we can send these former slaves back to bring the gospel? The result was the nation of Liberia. That didn't work very well either. And what happened was that so many Africans who thought they were going to go back to where they had come from could not find their place once they got there. So it's been very, very difficult for them, and our churches have to carry a lot of the blame for the kind of racist attitudes that we had toward African Americans.
All right, thank you very much. We're off to a good start. Dr. Luxton, I understand the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a very robust missionary program. How is it with your church?
I mean, in fact, the university I come from, Andrews University, is named after J.N. Andrews, who was our first missionary to Europe, and that's where the name came from. And our mission has been embedded into our church culture and way of thinking ever from its beginnings. I'm going to switch maybe the direction a little bit more because I do think that within our environment we actually have a lot of minorities engaged in mission now, and I think that is. I'm trying to think why that is. Maybe because our church is thinks in a world sense. Just from the structure, maybe there is a sense of this flow of people to and fro. It's more significant, I don't know. I think we also have a very robust structure from very early on. We have a student missionary program throughout all our universities and colleges, where a large number of students will take a year out across the band, across all ethnic groups, and spend a year somewhere in mission fields, which gives them a whole sense of engagement beyond their own community. We also do a lot of short-term missions that are engaging. So it's very hard for a young person to get through a university in our setting without having been engaged in mission in some form or another. And so that maybe changes the dynamics and the ways of thinking. Because I know when we look at our statistics, if you go back, in early days, it was largely white Americans or Europeans that were missionaries. When you look at the statistics now, that has changed. We have missionaries from all countries to all countries. And I think that in itself has encouraged minorities in the United States to also be engaged. I'm not saying we got it all solved, but I think some of those dynamics may actually have helped the engagement that I think we're seeing and hopefully will continue to see.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go over to John Peterson. Canon Peterson, your perspective on this, please.
First off, I want to say, and for the sake of transparency, for 22 years, I served as a missionary appointment of the Episcopal Church. So my comments today reflect, in part, that experience. When I received this program to do my research on it, the first thing I did was to call the mission office at the Episcopal Church Center in New York. And the question I asked was, how many missionaries do we have who are minorities and belong to minority ethnic groups? Because in the moderator's statement, and as Tony has said, there's a very small percentage of Baptists who are in the mission field who are from minorities. And we too, like the Baptists, and that's somewhat what word do I want? Not always happening. We too, like the Baptists, have a very small percentage. Our percentage actually happens to be a little bit higher, I think, than yours, to 10%. But our numbers are also much less, so we are certainly in the same type of camp that you are. I think that but the point that both of you have made are extremely important in relationship to the importance of having minorities from this country, Afro-Americans or Hispanics or whatever, in the mission field. And I must say that we all stand in awe of the Seventh-day Adventists. I mean, what you have done in your mission program, I think, is really an example for all churches. I mean, it's really is outstanding, and I've seen it actually at work in Asia and in Africa, and as well as in Europe. So we look to the Seventh-day Adventists, obviously, for better understanding of how we can do what is being done. I think that the paradigm that Tony brought out is really important, and actually was mentioned in this witness article, and I'm going to quote it. I think it's a solely white missionaries, a huge mistake if Christian missionaries equals white people. Then the Christian faith equals white Christianity.
Thank you. Let's go over to Dr. Trovall. Time is flying, so Dr. Trovall.
The Great Commission is for everyone. I mean, Christ calls people whoever they are, so and I appreciate the opportunity to think about this. I've never looked at missions in this particular angle, so this is very interesting. I think that those of us who come out of the Lutheran tradition, whether Missouri Synod or ELCA or Wisconsin Synod, our understanding of mission probably was formed very early on more about coming to the United States from Europe and making sure that we collected all the Lutherans so that they didn't become Seventh-day Adventists and Baptists. So the sense of mission was about collecting people who were already oriented toward being Lutheran. And had that tradition, and I think that that really is very important. So the understanding of mission in the Lutheran tradition, I don't think is robust as it is in some of the other denominations whose very existence depended upon outreach. And so, if I had to look at Lutheran statistics about minorities serving overseas in missionary capacity, I would say it would be probably the same sad story. And so, I think, at least in my tradition, I would say that we need to focus on mission, and many of you are great examples of that, and to encourage all people to consider that as a possibility of the calling.
Thank you very much, Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. I think we cannot talk about this subject without talking about the way paternalism has been a part of the way we've thought about overseas mission. International mission has, from the 19th century on, been thought of as a mixture of the perceived richness of being white and the blessings of being American culture. And so it was those sorts of things that we were communicating way too often, way too frequently. I do want to say that in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, we do all of our overseas mission in concert with. We have merged our mission, our overseas mission organization, with that of the United Church of Christ. So we are there's no distinction there. Our leader here in the United States of overseas mission is an African American woman. Now that doesn't mean that our percentages are all that much greater, but she does have a different point of view than some of the others that have been in those positions in the
About
past.
15 seconds.
Yeah, and that also our general minister president is an African American woman too. So that has some impact on what we're talking about.
Okay.
As well.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. It's time for a break. There's an important message we'd like for you to stand by, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We are so very glad you've joined us for today's discussion. We hope that it's been interesting to you. Certainly has been for me, and I'm anxious to hear what the summations are going to be. So let's go to those just now. Let's begin with Dr. Luxton. You're first.
As I've been listening to this conversation, it strikes me that the problem sometimes with mission is that we think we have it all and we're giving it. And I think that that is part of the challenge. Interestingly, in Europe, it's become so secular. There's more and more missionaries going to Europe from countries such as Africa, Brazil. And as I think we may find that beginning to happen in the United States, that may actually change the way we think and react to what mission is. That'll help engage people.
All right, thank you very much. And now Dr. Matthews.
Within the African American church, I am probably 99% sure that the senior pastor plays a huge part, a huge role in mobilizing the congregation and other African American pastors. We've had an opportunity to talk with other pastors and to inspire them, and we are now seeing those pastors going on mission trips and their members are going. So when I say that the senior pastor is the reason for the lack and the remedy, it's a positive thing, and it's a word of encouragement so that pastors can get involved.
All right, thank you. Now Dr. Troval.
We have the gospel, and I think the relevancy of sharing that with the world is clear, and it's that preciousness that we give, not in a paternalistic fashion, but in a way that's genuine love and care for people. And I think the encouragement of all people to be active in that missionary work is something that we should all support and do so in our own denominations.
All right, thank you for your participation today. And now Dr. Robeck.
Yes, in 1993, a large number of the Pentecostal churches in the United States met in Memphis in what became known as the Memphis Miracle. And what they basically said was, we've had enough of racism. We're going to move past this. We're going to reach out to people of color and so forth. And we're going to collaborate with churches that have people of color, like the Assemblies of God and the Church of God in Christ. The Church of God in Christ has done a wonderful job in missions, especially in the Caribbean and in certain parts of Africa where they've dealt especially with HIV/AIDS and they have really worked great there. And we've made a lot of progress since 1993 in all of our churches in bringing in African Americans, setting up pastors and churches and so forth. And now the missions is beginning to explode in that direction as well. But we've got a long way to go.
All right, thank you very much. Canon Peterson.
Yes, one major problem in relationship to mission is simply economics. And as budgets are being cut and more budgets are being cut, different types of programs, instead of having an appointed missionary like I was, who was paid by the mission board for 22 years, today it's many more volunteers in mission. And the people have to raise their own money to be able to do that, which makes it, for many situations, economically impossible for minorities to be able to participate in mission programs. And I think that that's a challenge for our churches, and one that we must, as a church, correct.
All right, thank you very much. And now Reverend Plumley, your summation.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that for the past 45 or 50 years, the Division of Overseas Mission of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, of which I'm a part, has mostly been characterized as assistance to churches who long ago came to be led by indigenous people. That was our emphasis for a long, long time. Create leadership and put those leaders in those churches there. And then what we do from here is to go and assist, and the opportunity that's there is that gives us a chance to concentrate on the good news, and also to recognize and then de-emphasize some of the cultural baggage that we all carry along with us, regardless of where we're coming from.
All right, thank you. It's been a great discussion today. Thank you each one for participating. This reminds me of when I was in high school. In the school I attended, there was a missionary program sponsored by the school. And we sent students down south of the border to Honduras, Ecuador, to Belize. And a lot of students caught that vision at that very young age. So maybe starting young is also a way to get people involved. I like what you said about the senior pastors, but there are others too that can be involved. Maybe youth leaders can inspire some of your members in your congregations to think about missions and do something for service. It seems today that young people are really into service. Maybe you've noticed that. And this is perhaps one way we can encourage them to serve the Lord, to get involved in their churches. For now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.